think it's very interesting, different generations of women, because when I joined the BBC, it was quite a male-dominated organisation, and it felt quite upper class, very white, very male, and a certain demographic to which I didn't completely fit in. And so it was a slightly alien environment, and obviously the world of the early 80s was a much more sexist place generally. So that was interesting. I worked for quite a few women of an older generation in the BBC, and very often they'd had to marry the job. They didn't really have, by and large, children, partners, and they had to dedicate themselves to the job in order to get on within it and make huge sacrifices. And they weren't necessarily always the easiest people to work with, because I think it's very hard being a pioneer, and they'd had to be very tough or change their personalities in order to be acceptable in that world. And although that was sometimes difficult, some of the people to work with, I feel a huge debt of gratitude to them, because the fact that they came before me made life easier for me and my generation of women coming through. And we didn't have to sacrifice everything. We could have marriages and children and have outside lives as well, and it was more acceptable. So, and in the time I've been in the BBC, 30 plus years, I've seen a huge change in the organisation. I think in terms of broadcasting industry, it's one of the most welcoming to women. And now then I look at my daughter who's 19, and I think, well, what are the issues for her? She went to an all-girls school, and she used to say to me, do you know what, I'm really fed up with people banging on about feminism. There's no issue, it's not a problem. And now that she's gone to university, I think she's taken a broader view of the world, because she hadn't really met much prejudice. And I think now she's sort of confronting some of it, seeing it, and she joined the Feminist Society. And so she's quite adamant about these things. And I think it is different actually for that generation. In many ways things are a lot better for women. But on the other hand, there's still a big pay gap between men and women in society generally. You look around the sort of FTSE top 100 companies, the boards are pretty male. So we're not there yet, but we have come a long way. They were women who wanted to go into broadcasting, but find it very stony ground, find it very tough, and they, in the sort of the generally sexist society that we lived in at that time, would have been patronised, would have had lots of unhelpful attitudes applied to them, and in a way they had to demonstrate to everyone around them that they were tough as hell and were not sort of just playing at this job, and that in a way they were tougher than a lot of the men around. And not everybody wants to have to go through that. Not everyone wants to have to be proving that all the time. It's tough. And so I don't know that, some of them were not that happy, I think, in their work. It was really hard going for them. And people were critical of them as well. They were going, oh my God, she's so scary, she's a nightmare, and so on. So you got quite a lot of that. But I think if you saw it from their point of view, you could see why they'd had to be the way they were. And some of them were sort of personally encouraging to me, but they were scary people. And I didn't particularly want to emulate them personality-wise. But the great thing was I didn't have to, because they'd forged the way, they'd sort of made the path, and then my generation were able to be more themselves. Because in the end, if you're having to give a performance all the time and try to make yourself into something you're not, that's a great strain. And we were able to be just a bit more natural about it and have fewer of those unhelpful attitudes applied to us.